Doug Casey, it's a pleasure to have you here. I'm thrilled to be able to interview you because I've spent the last 2 days reading your new book in anticipation of our Friday release into the Laissez Faire Club. The interview is something of a different literary style, isn't it, from just writing straight essays?
You're right, but not to make a comparison, but I think that it was Plato that did it first with his dialogues with between Socrates and Glaucon. So it's an old format, and I think it works well because Louis James, who I'm having the conversations with, is a brilliant guy.
But he does seem to, and it makes you comfortable to talk to somebody who more or less gets your way of thinking, doesn't it?
Well, that's right, because most of the people I talk to don't get my way of thinking. That's why the book is called Totally Incorrect, because the average person out there just doesn't think like a libertarian. I often say that a libertarian can mate with other people physically, but trying to mate with them intellectually is like trying to mate with a chimpanzee. You just can't do it. I've come to the conclusion that libertarians are genetic mutants, actually, which I hate to think in those terms because it means that the chances of us transforming the world are very low, since the problems that we have today aren't an intellectual problem; they're a psychological problem on the part of most people, and you can't change people's psychology. Anyway,
tell me this? What do you think is the purpose then of holding libertarian views? I mean, what personal advantage does it afford a person?
That's a good question. It really doesn't afford us as individuals much advantage at all. For instance, I live in Aspen, Colorado during the northern summer, and I don't get invited to any of the parties I used to get invited to because I'm like a skeleton at the feast. People don't want to hear anything different from what their core beliefs are. And after I talk about the weather and the state of the roads and sports scores for 10 minutes, I get bored, and I like to talk about things that are important. And to me, that means philosophy. But practical and applied philosophy is politics and religion. And those are the two things you're not supposed to talk about. So being a libertarian is a big disadvantage because you separate yourself inadvertently, involuntarily actually, from the rest of society because we don't believe the things that the rest of these people do, and we don't even think the same way they do. So no, it's a disadvantage of being a libertarian from a social point of view. Of course, it's an advantage being a libertarian in that I think we see reality more clearly and we can take advantage of it. But not to go on, Jeff.
No, but I understand your point. I mean, there's a social disadvantage. You know, there's a chance that you find yourself isolated and parties saying things that annoy people. But I'm intrigued by your idea that it helps you to be libertarian or to understand these ideas helps you see reality more clearly, and that gives you a certain peace of mind and a certain edge, doesn't it?
It does. And there's one more thing that stands as a big advantage to being a libertarian. It's that I think you have a much clearer view of ethics and what's right and wrong. And it's a feeling to feel that, or know, in my opinion, that you're on the moral high ground to actually be righteous. So that's actually a big plus too. It clears your mind. You're not as confused as most people are, even though they don't acknowledge it because they don't think it out well enough. So being a libertarian is a double-edged sword, but we're a small minority, I fear, of society. We're way on one end of the bell-shaped curve.
Do you ever have the feeling that you know in advance of events taking place what's coming because of your knowledge of economics, of the nature of politics, the structure of the world, the cause-effect relationships? That reading the newspaper is almost can be boring because it's all so at some level predictable. Like we know, for example, that the latest law passed to do X, whatever it is, isn't going to work.
Yeah, as Yogi Berra said, it's deja vu all over again. And that's simply because actions have consequences, cause has effect. And people that think in a conventional political manner actually must not believe that or must not see that when you drop a stone off of a building, it's going to hit the ground eventually. So, yeah, it is. It is. It tends to give you perhaps a gloomy cast on the future of humanity on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you understand basic economics, you realize that the average person does try to produce more than he consumes and save the difference just for personal prudence. That builds capital. And you understand that technology keeps advancing as long as there's capital around to fund it. So yeah, it's good news, bad news, actually.
What about providing some distance? There's a certain delight that I take in being detached from the daily manias, and shock that people go through when they discover that, the stimulus didn't work, or that gun control failed to control guns, or that, the latest Fed trick, failed to raise employment. There's a certain delight, isn't there, in standing back from it and with a knowing awareness.
Sure, like you see them invade a country, and you know that that's not going to cause peace. So, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's I don't know what the answer to these things are or what we ought to do. I certainly 100% approve and back what you're doing with laissez-faire books. But on the other hand, it's not an intellectual war we're fighting. From an intellectual point of view, it seems completely obvious. Right. I see it as we're fighting against psychological and even spiritual problems with these collectivists, these statists out there. And those things are very hard to change. One reason I like laissez-faire books so much is that there are a certain number of people out there that once you show them 2 + 2 = 4, it drops the scales from their eyes. So let those that have ears hear, as it were.
There are certain thinkers that I've read in my life that shocked me and alarmed me. That fundamentally, even with a certain internal protest, I find changed the way I think about the world. And I'm thinking about people like Ayn Rand Murray Rothbard is the same. Noam Chomsky did that for me on foreign policy, and I think I would have to put you in that category too. You know that there's a kind of, when you read your work, there's a kind of alarm that you feel as a reader, and yet you know, a day or two goes by and you've kind of invaded the mental space, you know, in a wonderful way.
Thank you. And that's actually somewhat, it's inadvertent because I seem to just do that naturally. But on the other hand, it's somewhat intentional because if you consider that the average person is not stupid, but unenlightened perhaps, uh, you've got to treat them a bit like a recalcitrant donkey. And the first thing you do is hit the donkey between the eyes with a 2x4 to get its attention. So, yeah, there is a certain method to that apparent madness of being shocking. Also, it amuses me. And I guess I'm at the stage of life where the most important thing to me is keeping down my low threshold of boredom and amusing myself.
Yeah, well, Murray was this way, and it's hard. It's hard, isn't it, to get people to think about anything, and sometimes saying something that sounds, you know, really objectionable from the point of view of the civic religion is the best way.
That's right. And the other thing that I don't do with people in general or anybody is I don't argue with people. I like to listen to what people have to say, even people that have antithetical views, just so I can kind of probe into what's going on in their psyche, what's going on in their soul, and listen, and then I'll present my view and watch how they react, see if it has an effect. But arguing, very different, is non-productive because as soon as you get into an argument, emotion comes. Number one, which is not good, and number two, people feel that they've got to defend their position, not find the truth, but defend their position and make the other guy wrong. So, you know, I enjoy having conversations, not arguments with people about these subjects. And I also find that's a more effective way of winning hearts and minds in the relatively few cases that's possible.
Well, you put it that way, and it makes perfect sense. It makes argument just sound like a gigantic waste of time. I mean, you could just sit and listen and learn, and you're right, explore why it is that another person holds the views they do. That can sometimes be an enduring mystery, isn't it? You know, why is it that people continue to cling to lies and myths? And it does make for a certain study, doesn't it?
It does. And that's really why I think that the problem that we have with socialists and the statists of all stripes, it's really a psychological and spiritual problem, much more than an intellectual problem. You can lay these things out in the most logical way possible, and they just won't accept it because it strikes at something in their psyche that doesn't allow them to accept it. So, but anyway, we have to keep trotting on, both because it entertains ourselves, and there's a certain percentage of people out there that when they hear things will recognize, oh my God, I've been making a mistake. I hate to sound arrogant by saying that most people are wrong, but that's my view, and I defend it. So, sorry, people, if I'm being offensive.
How many countries have you visited in the course of your career?
Well, I haven't done a recent count, but it's someplace around 175. Of course, it depends on how you define country. I'm counting colonies of other countries, and like some of the little places in the Caribbean are still British and French colonies. So it's about 175, more or less.
As you look around the world today, is there any place that you would point to that you would call relatively free? I mean, given that we live in a statist world that's that an American would go to and discover a sense of freedom that maybe he or she wouldn't experience in the U.S.
Well, there is no place in the world that, from my point of view, qualifies as a free country. Uh, However, that being said, if you're an American, the worst place you can possibly be is in the U.S. because the U.S. government considers you as its property. They consider you like at least a milk cow. And if things get out of control at some point, it happens in so many countries in the past, they might treat you as a beef cow. And I spend a lot of time, most of my time actually, in Argentina and Uruguay. In Argentina, we put together kind of like a Gulch, rather fantastic facility in the wine country with the most unbelievable amenities of any community in the world. And I spend a lot of time there, and I like being out of the U.S. because when you're in a foreign country, the local government treats you as a desirable tourist. So they treat you well as a tourist. They want you to spend money, and they consider you somebody else's property. And especially in a country like Argentina, where the government is pathologically incompetent. They don't know what's going on, and they don't care. I mean, the people in office are there just to steal. So they have a different agenda than people that are running the empire in the U.S. do. So I recommend freedom-oriented Americans look abroad, and look abroad urgently, because we're going to get foreign exchange controls in the U.S., and then you're going to be trapped in that country like a lobster in a trap. You won't be able to get your money out.
It's a good opportunity for young people without family to pick up and move. People are scared of that, which is strange in a way because, it wasn't too many generations ago where Americans gladly picked up, moved west, and before that, moved to the New World. So there's a heritage of moving around to find freedom.
You're absolutely right, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why Americans, at one point anyway, were exceptional, because we got the most entrepreneurial, adventurous people that picked up and left. But it's kind of reverted to the mean now, and Americans are acting like medieval serfs. That's what most people act like when they say, I can't leave my home country. Parents were here. They're thinking like serfs.
Mm. Yeah. This is the life I was born into, and this is what I have to do.
Yeah, and technology has made it possible to, go more than like 10 miles away from your village, because beyond that there might be dragons. You can get on a plane now, but most people are scaredy cats, and it's really rather stupid, because from a strictly financial point of view, there are a lot of advantages to jumping into a foreign pond where you're unusual, where you have knowledge that the locals don't have by virtue just having been brought up in the U.S. So it's advantageous in all ways. It's safer, more pleasant. Your standard of living is higher. But most Americans don't believe that. Like I say, they're programmed to think like serfs. So I don't try to convince anybody of that. I just tell them what I see.
When you do a lot of that, telling people what you think in your book, I'm very excited that it's out. It's Doug Casey week. at Laissez Faire Books, I can tell you. So everybody's very excited about Friday in particular, where we release your ebook. So you'll be talking to, in the same way, to many, many thousands starting Friday, and we hope that the numbers will grow as the time goes on. So thank you very much for visiting with me today and for putting all the work you did into your new book.
Jeff, it's a pleasure talking to you anytime.
Take care, Doug.
Thanks.